Greetings. So, last night, a number of people drew my attention to a Facebook post by Benayah Israel, in which he attempted to treat one of the pews at First African Baptist Church in Savannah, Georgia, as having Hebrew, specifically Hebrew in the Solitreo script. In his post, he was also kind enough to transcribe precisely what he felt was there, and he even offered a translation. Now, I want to say up front that I really appreciate Benayah's efforts here, as he's the first person I personally know of who has attempted to actually look at the markings and make a case for Hebrew. In this video, I will be expressing some doubt about his conclusions, but I want to be clear that this video is intended to neither disrespect him nor dissuade him from his search. I actually hope the gentleman and others around him continue to participate in these public exercises in which they explore different possible ideas regarding the markings in those pews. Oh, and by the way, worthy of note, those excited by Benayah's post seem to include Dante Fortson, who shared it and then proceeded to draw Brother Berean's attention to it with a tag, presumably because Brother Berean had recently had me on his show to discuss the pews. So, too, it was praised by Jacoba, who, if I'm not mistaken, is part of the End of the World Ministries. I'm not sure either of these gentlemen noticed the issues with the post, which I'll be touching on in this video. Whatever the case, I'd like to take a brief look at what was proposed in Benayah's Facebook post. The first thing I want to note is the translation website he mentioned as having been used by him to try to decipher the strings of characters, as that site is going to be relevant towards the end of this video. Now, let's take a look at the markings, and by the way, lest, just in case viewers find certain identifications here a bit curious, I ask that you remember that he's positing that these are Hebrew characters written in specifically the Solitreo script, which is a Sephardic form of Hebrew cursive. And I'll provide a link in the video description to the source that he used for that script. So first, he notes that he feels that he sees two hets, or chetz as is said in modern Israeli Hebrew now, but two hets, which he feels might be translated the, i.e. as a definite article. Now, I realize that those who are familiar with Hebrew will immediately find such a translation suggestion perplexing, but we'll get to that in a bit. Then he notes that he feels he sees the string of characters yod yod wa, which is treated as a truncated form of the tetragrammaton, variations of which are found in rabbinic literature, though more commonly just yod yod. Then he alludes to a prefix bet, though he doesn't specifically refer to it in that way, and he's, a bet which is serving as a preposition. Then he notes that he feels he sees shin and bet, which he proposes could mean bass voice, i.e. a deep voice or a low voice. Now, I realize, again, those familiar with Hebrew will find that curious as well, and again, we'll touch on how he likely reached that conclusion a bit later in this video. Finally, he offers one possible translation of the total string of characters, the God with bass voice. With that, let's take a closer look at the precise pew he was attempting to decipher. He employed this picture here, the pew on the right in particular. So I'd like to zoom in just a bit more to get a clearer view of the markings on that pew to show which portions he saw as certain characters, as well as which portions he disregarded or passed over in silence. This marking here is alleged to be a chet. This marking to the right of it, however, was ignored. It was apparently treated as irrelevant or superfluous. This marking here was also alleged to be a het. These two lines inside of that marking, however, were ignored or treated as irrelevant. These three lines were alleged to be the string of characters yod yod wa. This marking was alleged to be a bet, and this collection of markings was alleged to be shin and bet, or perhaps bet and shin. As will come up later in the video, the precise ordering or direction of that, i.e. bet and shin, as well as the yod yod wa, is actually open to question. Whatever the case for now, he felt this, it's worthy of note that he felt this string of proposed characters, het het, yod yod wa, bet bet shin, might form a sentence that could be translated, the God with bass voice. Now, let me state this. If the top two markings, which look somewhat like semicircles, are actually instances of the letter het, we can set those letters right side up by turning the pew 90 degrees to the left, which I'll do now, and then we can zoom in on the markings to take a closer look. So again, this portion is treated as reading het het. Then this portion is apparently treated as reading yod yod wa. And finally, the rest is apparently treated as reading beit beit shin. Now, one might immediately notice some curious issues here. First, while it is proposed to be Hebrew, most of it is moving left to right. Secondly, the portion marked in red abruptly moves in the opposite direction from the rest of the text. It's moving from right to left. However, another possibility is that he actually intended even for that middle portion to be read left to right as well. So instead of yod yod wa, it's actually wa wa yod. In that case, I must say that, proposing that this alleged Hebrew text moves from left to right feels curious, especially after having experienced Pastor Kelly Richardson's argument in which he insisted that even the columns of images in the stained glass windows in the church's sanctuary moving from right to left hinted at how the Hebrew language moved. Here, take a look.
Here, I'm going to step back so you can see a bigger picture of the sanctuary, right? You can see it behind me, right? I want y'all to pay attention to that. The pictures are listed just like ancient Hebrew reads from right to left. So the first pastor, which is his name is Reverend Andrew Bryan, 1812. Oh, you see how it is. It goes from right to left, right to left.
Notice how they completely left out me explaining the arrangements of each pastor on the stained glass picture that's arranged according to how the Hebrew language is read from right to left.
Now, as a disclaimer, I recognize that Benayah Israel and Kelly Richardson are two different men. And so Benayah is under no obligation to reconcile his own positions with those of Pastor Kelly. But I just wanted to share that memory, as this new argument feels like an abrupt shift after that argument, which was pushed by Pastor Kelly, as the image columns moving from right to left were supposed to point to the Hebrew language, yet now we're receiving an argument in which it's what is purported to be the actual Hebrew inscriptions themselves in the pews don't necessarily move right to left. But that aside, in the middle portion, if the middle portion is to read wa yo yod, it becomes more awkward as a mere reference to the Tetragrammaton. The yod yod can be a stand-in for the Tetragrammaton, as I said earlier, that's common in rabbinic literature. But the wa at the start now comes off as seemingly a conjunction between that tetragrammic reference and those two hets, which are purported to form some sort of definite article. And with that in mind, we can now get to those who might be wondering, how in the world did he conclude that two hets should be treated as the, which is to say, treated as a definite article? Before I get into this, I want to try to word this carefully, as again, it's not my intention to insult Benayah Israel, and on the contrary, I really appreciate the effort he made, and I hope he continues to share his explorations. But in this part, I must confess, the language might feel a bit sharp, as I sincerely believe that this is indicative of a stark unfamiliarity with Hebrew being combined with his trust of a translation site he used and his own unwitting or unconscious hitting of the wrong keys. Permit me to explain. So this is the website he used at doitinhebrew.com. And again, I'll share a link in the video description. It is not possible that he plugged in two hets and got back the. However, I'd like to share what I think actually happened. I'll zoom in here on the keyboard provided by the site. Now, note that we have het on the right, i.e. the 8th character of the Hebrew alphabet, aleph bet, and he on the left, which is the 5th character of the Hebrew aleph bet. These two characters can be mistaken by a person unfamiliar with Hebrew. However, they don't look alike in the Solitreo script. Moreover, in this case, there's even a het at the top of the key for he. It seems obvious to me that he accidentally hit the he key twice, as I'll do here, and then he submitted that which the perhaps struggling translation application gave back the, as you can see here. And note that hey really is used as the definite article in Hebrew. Now, the issue here isn't merely that he hit the wrong key without realizing it. Rather, what stands out is that he apparently did not know which letter serves as the definite article in Hebrew, which is a fairly basic and elementary part of the language. Moving on, I think hitting the wrong key also helps to explain how he arrived at base voice for Beit Shin. I'll zoom in here and note that there is a sin which appears atop the key for Samech. He was likely reaching for Shin, saw the sin at the top of the key for Samech, and unwittingly hit the key for Samech. As a result, he unwittingly entered Bet Samech, which the application interpreted as bas, a modern Israeli Hebrew term which is a loan word from the English word bass, like bass guitar or something like that. That's why the application gave him bass voice as one of the options. So that captures my preliminary thoughts thus far. I do not believe the sentence proposed is coherent. I do not believe the last character of the proposed string of characters is remotely justified. I don't see how you get a shin from what appears there. The proposed translation, with all due respect, shows a stark unfamiliarity with Hebrew. The proposed text moving from left to right is curious, to put it mildly. Also, the portions which were ignored beg a question. Were those mere random scratches? And if so, might the entirety of the markings be mere random scratches, which a creative mind is attempting to wrench Hebrew from? It's food for thought. I'll close here by saying that, again, I did not intend this disrespectfully towards Benayah, nor do I want to dissuade him from his work. I honestly apologize if my tone was a bit sharp at points, but I hope it's clear that I do sincerely appreciate his work here. While I do not agree with his conclusions, I emphatically do not agree with his conclusion, I feel he has put in more effort than any previous proponent of the Hebrew position I can think of, and I find some of his reasoning clever. Therefore, I hope he continues to develop his thoughts on this topic, as at the very least, it makes for an interesting linguistic exercise. As always, I look forward to the comments of others. God bless.